There is a reason someone developed such a powerful connection with you that even they may not completely understand what happened. And if you have been feeling a strange emotional tension lately, if someone's presence around you feels intense, confusing, heavy, or impossible to dismiss, this may reveal the reason behind it. Because sometimes a person does not just enjoy your company. They do not simply feel a temporary attraction. Sometimes they become deeply attached in a way that surprises even them. Their emotions grow stronger than they expected, and suddenly they do not know how to handle what they are feeling. The most interesting part is that the very qualities that made them fall for you may also be the same qualities that make them step back, become quiet, act guarded, or feel emotionally overwhelmed. This is the part many people misunderstand. They believe strong feelings always create immediate closeness. But the truth is, intense emotions can sometimes create fear before they create connection. What makes someone develop such a deep bond is rarely only about appearance, chemistry, or perfect timing. It usually happens when something inside their emotional world is awakened, something hidden, something they ignored for years, something they stopped hoping for. Sometimes a person enters your life and touches a part of you that was sleeping, and when that happens, love becomes more than attraction. It becomes a powerful inner experience. It becomes confusing because they are not only responding to you, they are also facing everything inside themselves that your presence has brought forward. This is why strong feelings can sometimes appear as distance, uncertainty, hesitation, or emotional resistance. The first reason someone became so deeply drawn to you is something many people fail to recognize about themselves. It was not only what you did for them, it was how they felt when they were around you. There is a huge difference between those two things. Some people try to become unforgettable by constantly proving their value. They give too much, explain too much, adjust too much, and work too hard to earn someone's love. But you may have carried something much more powerful without even realizing it. You offered emotional depth without trying to impress. You showed kindness without chasing. You gave warmth without demanding anything in return. That combination is uncommon, very uncommon. And for someone who has experienced relationships filled with emotional distance, confusion, manipulation, or shallow connections, your presence may have felt completely different. They felt understood without feeling controlled. They felt accepted without feeling pressured. They experienced closeness without feeling trapped. And that kind of emotional experience can affect someone more deeply than simple attraction ever could. Physical attraction is easy to recognize. Chemistry is easy to explain. But feeling emotionally peaceful with someone, after spending years protecting your heart, can feel almost overwhelming, especially for a person who learned that closeness often leads to disappointment. They may have created a life based on emotional protection, independence, and control. They may have convinced themselves they did not need anyone too much. Then you appeared, and without forcing anything, you made them question the walls they built. You made them wonder why being vulnerable suddenly felt possible, and that can be frightening for someone who has used those walls as protection for a long time. They may never admit it openly, but somewhere inside they started asking themselves, why do I feel so comfortable around this person? Why do I want to be closer? Why do I feel more connected to myself when I am with them? And those questions are often where deep attachment begins. Here is the surprising truth many people overlook. Sometimes someone creates distance not because their feelings disappeared, but because their feelings became stronger than they expected. When someone has spent years hiding their emotions, genuine connection does not always feel peaceful at first. Sometimes it feels unfamiliar. Sometimes it feels risky. Their mind may tell them to step away, even when their heart wants to move closer. Their thoughts become louder. They replay conversations. They analyze small details. They search for reasons to understand what is happening inside them. They try to regain control over emotions that feel too powerful. But beneath all the confusion, one thing remains clear. They were affected by you because the connection felt different from anything they could create by force. They experienced something rare, emotional comfort. And this leads to another reason someone may have fallen so deeply for you. one that many people never consider. They may have seen in you a version of themselves that they lost somewhere along the way. Sometimes we are drawn to people because they awaken forgotten parts of our own identity. The hidden parts, the softer parts, the honest parts, the parts we stopped expressing because life taught us to hide them. Your personality, your emotional openness, your quiet confidence, and the way you carry yourself may have reminded them of something they once had, or something they always wanted to become. They may not even fully understand why you affect them so strongly. They only know that being around you feels meaningful, it feels familiar, it feels different. Maybe your kindness reminded them of a gentler version of themselves they left behind. Maybe your courage showed them emotions they had been avoiding. Maybe your authenticity made them realize how exhausting it had become to pretend everything was fine. And when someone experiences that kind of reflection, it creates an inner awakening. Suddenly, they see the difference between the person they show the world and the person they truly are inside. And that realization can be uncomfortable, because personal growth does not always begin with happiness. Sometimes it begins with discomfort. Sometimes it reveals loneliness, emotional needs, and truths a person has been avoiding for years. If someone has lived through emotional avoidance, constant distraction, or the habit of keeping everything under control, your presence may have interrupted that pattern. You became a reminder of feelings they could no longer ignore. This is why some people continue thinking about someone who made a deep impact on them. Not because they are unable to move on, but because something meaningful was activated inside them. They start remembering small moments, a simple conversation, a certain expression, a quiet memory that suddenly feels important. Ordinary things begin carrying emotional weight. A song reminds them of you. A place reminds them of you. A place reminds them of you. A peaceful night makes them think about what they felt in your presence. They may tell themselves to stop thinking about you. They may try to focus on other things. They may convince themselves that it was nothing serious. But deep inside, they know something changed. And the more they try to ignore it, the more they recognize that the connection touched a place within them that they had not visited in a long time. That is what makes certain connections unforgettable. It is not only about the person in front of you, it is about the emotions, memories, and hidden parts of yourself that come alive when they enter your world. And sometimes, the person who changes your emotional landscape the most is the person who never tried to change you at all, but their thoughts keep returning again and again. Why does this happen? Because emotions that remain unresolved continue searching for understanding. Your presence became connected to something unfinished deep inside them, something they never fully faced. And until they acknowledge that hidden truth, they cannot completely move forward. Not only from you, but also from the feelings and memories connected to what you awakened within them. This is where things become complicated, because the protective part of the mind often fights against emotional change. It wants what feels familiar. It wants control. It wants distance because distance feels safer. But real, life-changing love often challenges those defenses. It quietly says, "You cannot stay the same forever." That is why someone can deeply care about you and still create distance. They may delay conversations, avoid vulnerability, become inconsistent, or act colder than what they truly feel. Not always because their emotions are gone, but because a battle is happening inside them. One part wants to move closer, another part wants to protect itself and escape. This inner conflict can make their actions feel confusing. One day they seem open and connected. The next day they seem distant and closed off. And if you have been trying to understand this behavior, remember this important point. Confusing behavior does not always mean someone does not care. Sometimes it reveals a person who is struggling with emotions they do not know how to handle. Of course, unhealthy actions should never be ignored or justified. But emotional inconsistency can sometimes come from fear, not from a lack of feeling. A person who truly feels nothing usually does not create emotional confusion. They simply move on. But when feelings and fear exist together, the result can become complicated. The challenge is not always the emotion itself. The challenge is whether someone has the emotional strength to carry that emotion. And many people never learned how to do that, especially those who learned early that depending on others could lead to pain. Behind emotional distance, there is often a hidden story, a fear connected to rejection, abandonment, betrayal, criticism, or moments when their emotions were not understood. Over time, those experiences create protective habits. They learn to say, "Do not need too much, do not trust too quickly, do not show everything you feel." Those habits become a shield. Then suddenly, someone enters their life and creates a connection that challenges everything they built. Not a simple attraction, not a temporary interest, something deeper, something that reaches beyond the surface. And suddenly, every emotional defense they created begins to feel tested. They may not consciously think about where those fears came from, but their reactions still carry those old memories. Their body remembers what their mind tries to forget. Their emotions remember what their logic tries to control. So while their feelings for you become stronger, their fear can become stronger too. This is why intense love can feel both beautiful and frightening at the same time. It does not only create excitement, it creates exposure. It forces someone to be seen, and being truly seen can feel dangerous for someone who spent years hiding parts of themselves. But there is another reason someone may have fallen so deeply for you, and this reason reveals something even more powerful. It is not about your words. It is not about the promises you made. It is not even about how available you were. It is about what they felt when they imagined a life without you. Stay with this idea, because this is where many people finally understand what was really happening. Many people only recognize the importance of something when they feel it slipping away. When everything feels available, some people become comfortable. They delay honesty. They avoid difficult conversations. They keep emotions at a safe distance. But when they sense a change, when they notice you becoming quieter, when they feel your energy pulling back, something inside them begins to shift. Suddenly, imagination meets reality. The possibility of losing you becomes real, and that moment can break through the walls they built around their emotions. They can no longer hide behind comfort or uncertainty. They begin to understand what your presence actually meant. If someone became more emotionally affected after you stopped chasing, if they started noticing your absence more, if they seemed restless or more aware of your distance, there may be a reason. Sometimes separation reveals what closeness allowed them to ignore. Sometimes someone does not understand the depth of their attachment until they feel what it would be like to live without that connection. The thought of losing you creates emotional clarity. It shows them what they were trying not to admit. And this is the deeper reason they became so attached. You became meaningful in a way that was difficult to replace. Not because you were flawless, not because you completed every missing piece of their life, but because the emotional experience of being with you became unique. People can replace attention. They can replace temporary comfort. They can replace distractions. But replacing a connection where they felt genuinely understood is much harder. Emotional connection leaves a different kind of mark. It stays because it touches something deeper than the moment. It becomes a memory of how they felt when they were around you, and that feeling can be incredibly powerful. When someone realizes that a connection has become emotionally significant, there are usually two possible reactions. Either they become brave enough to move toward it, or their fear becomes stronger and pushes them away. There is rarely a completely neutral response, because once a person recognizes something matters, they have to decide whether they will open themselves or protect themselves. Some people choose courage, others choose distance, but both reactions can come from the same place. The connection meant something. This is why the most confusing actions sometimes come from the person who feels the most deeply. They may quietly observe from a distance. They may think about you without reaching out. They may miss you but hide it. They may feel a strong emotional connection while remaining silent, because the deeper issue is not simply that they care about you. The deeper issue is that caring about you forced them to face something they avoided for a long time. They had to confront their own difficulty accepting the very love they always wanted. Because wanting love and allowing yourself to receive love are two completely different experiences. Many people dream about deep connection, but when real intimacy arrives, it asks for something much harder: honesty, presence, responsibility, emotional openness. And if someone carries fear, shame, or old emotional wounds, genuine love can feel overwhelming. The biggest barrier between two people is not always distance, timing, or outside circumstances. Sometimes the biggest barrier is the moment someone realizes that fully accepting love means facing the parts of themselves they have hidden for years. The hidden question beneath all their avoidance is often this: what if I let someone truly see me and they still leave? This is the fear many people never express, yet it quietly influences the way they connect. It appears through delayed replies, emotional walls, mixed signals, and moments when they seem close and then suddenly disappear. From the outside it may look like confusion, but internally there may be a much deeper struggle happening. Someone who built their life around emotional control does not fear love because love is weak. They fear love because love has the power to reveal everything control was protecting. And what has been protected is often not a lack of feelings. It is vulnerability. It is the part of them that remembers being hurt, the part that still carries old disappointment, the part that secretly wonders if they are truly worthy of being loved without having to earn it. This is why certain connections feel impossible to ignore. You did not simply attract their attention. You reached places inside them that had been quiet for years, places they stopped exploring, places hidden beneath routines, achievements, distractions, and emotional habits. Then you appeared, and suddenly those hidden emotions started rising again. They felt more deeply, they reflected more, they remembered more. Something inside them became awake, and once the heart begins revealing the truth, the mind cannot easily pretend anymore. Here is something many people misunderstand. Emotional distance does not always appear before feelings. Sometimes it appears after feelings become too powerful to ignore. A person may step back because they are trying to understand themselves. They may feel overwhelmed by questions they cannot answer. Why do I care this much? Why does their absence affect me so strongly? Why do I keep thinking about them even when I try not to? Why does this person stay on my mind when I want to move forward? Those questions can feel frightening because every answer leads closer to vulnerability. And vulnerability is exactly what a guarded person has spent years avoiding. Deep inside every person are emotions they may have hidden away. Not only pain, but also tenderness, hope, connection, and the desire to be truly known. Some people become strong by becoming unreachable. They become independent by convincing themselves they need nothing. They survive by keeping emotional distance. But then someone enters their life who makes closeness feel possible again. And suddenly everything they buried begins to rise. Their desire for connection becomes impossible to ignore. Their gentle side begins to return, and that change can feel deeply unsettling for them. The painful part is that many people misunderstand this emotional awakening. They see it as a threat instead of an opportunity for growth. Instead of recognizing love as something that invites them to become more open, they experience it as something that challenges the identity they built for years. Somewhere inside they think, I was okay before this, I knew how to handle life before this, I was not this exposed before this person came into my world. And because emotional openness feels unfamiliar, they may start believing that the intensity itself is the problem. They may connect the discomfort with you, even though you are not the source of the pain. You simply became the person who revealed what was already hidden inside them. You became the reflection. You became the moment that forced them to notice emotions they had been avoiding. And many people run from reflections that show them truths they are not prepared to accept. This is why the person who feels the strongest connection may sometimes be the person who struggles the most to move closer. Deep feelings do not always come with emotional skills. Loving someone intensely does not automatically mean knowing how to communicate, how to trust, how to stay present, or how to handle vulnerability in a healthy way. Someone can feel an incredible amount of love and still struggle to express it properly. This is one of the most difficult realities in relationships, especially for people who are highly sensitive to emotions. You may sense the bond. You may feel that something real exists beneath their actions. You may understand the fear behind their silence. But understanding someone's emotions does not remove the pain caused by their absence. Recognizing their struggles does not mean you have to ignore your own needs. And this is where your own emotional path becomes just as important as theirs. When someone becomes deeply attached to you, there is a natural temptation to focus completely on their internal battle. You begin searching for answers everywhere. You analyze every message. You study every change in their behavior. You notice every moment they become distant and every moment they come closer. You start trying to understand the meaning behind every silence, every reaction, and every small sign. Slowly, you may begin carrying the emotional responsibility for both people. You try to translate feelings they cannot express. You wait for the day they finally open up. You hope that enough patience, enough understanding, and enough love will help them overcome their fear. But there is a point where something important must be remembered. Love should never require you to disappear from your own life. It should never require you to constantly sacrifice your peace just to understand someone else's confusion. This is where many caring and emotionally aware people become stuck. They mistake compassion for responsibility. They believe, if I understand their pain deeply enough, maybe I can make them feel safe enough to choose me. But one person cannot heal another person's wounds through love alone. Support can help. Patience can help. Understanding can help. But true healing begins when the person carrying the wound decides to face it themselves. They have to choose honesty instead of hiding. They have to choose growth instead of repeating old patterns. They have to stop allowing fear to control every emotional decision. And that change usually does not happen through dramatic moments. It often begins quietly. It starts with a small realization, a moment when they notice that running away has become more painful than staying. A moment when they understand that emotional distance did not protect their heart. It only created more loneliness. A moment when they finally see that control gave them protection, but it never gave them true peace. That is often where transformation begins. Not when feelings become stronger, but when avoiding those feelings becomes impossible to continue. And if this person truly developed a deep emotional connection with you, they may be experiencing that internal struggle even if you cannot see it from the outside. People do not easily forget someone who touched a meaningful part of them, especially someone who brought both comfort and challenge into their life. A connection that creates healing, while also exposing fears, leaves a powerful emotional mark. It stays in memory. It influences how they think. It changes the way they understand closeness. Even if they appear calm, distant, or completely unaffected, their private emotional world may tell a different story. They may replay old conversations in their mind. They may remember small moments that seemed ordinary at the time, but later became meaningful. They may think about what they should have said. They may wonder if they pushed away something valuable because they were afraid. They may question whether they allowed fear to make decisions that their heart did not truly want. And this is where regret becomes powerful. Regret removes the excuses people use to avoid the truth. It forces them to look at what they lost, what they ignored, and what they were too afraid to protect. Sometimes a person does not understand the importance of a connection while they have it. Sometimes clarity arrives after distance creates silence, and that silence reveals what was always there. Here is something many people overlook. The deepest connections are not always the easiest ones. Sometimes the connections that affect us most are the ones that challenge our comfort, expose our fears, and push us to become more honest with ourselves. Stay with this thought because the next part reveals why some people continue carrying a connection long after they try to move on. It continues to live inside a person even when there is distance between two people. Sometimes a connection keeps changing someone long after the conversations stop. Sometimes losing access to your presence finally helps them understand what your presence truly gave them. Sometimes separation becomes the lesson that closeness could not teach. The heart often learns through contrast, through silence, through the feeling of something missing that was once easily available. This is why some people return with a different mindset. Not because time itself magically repaired everything, but because they finally reached a place where their own emotional truth became impossible to ignore. They reached the point where avoiding their feelings became more painful than facing them. They discovered something difficult. The same walls they built to protect themselves were also blocking the love they wanted. But there is another truth you must carry with balance and wisdom. Sometimes the greatest healing does not happen when someone comes back. Sometimes the greatest healing happens when you finally let go. This matters because emotional strength means accepting reality, even when reality is different from what your heart hoped for. Yes, someone can feel deeply connected to you. Yes, someone can experience emotions they never expected. Yes, someone can feel overwhelmed because the bond became more meaningful than they were prepared for. But if they repeatedly choose fear instead of connection, silence instead of communication, and comfort instead of growth, then their love remains unfinished. And unfinished love, no matter how intense it feels, can still leave wounds. This is the difference many people forget. Strong feelings are not the same as emotional readiness. A person can care deeply and still not know how to create a healthy relationship, because lasting love requires more than emotion. It requires maturity. It requires honesty. It requires effort. It requires consistency. It requires the courage to show up even when fear appears. Without these things, even powerful feelings can remain trapped in imagination instead of becoming a real experience. So what do you do with this understanding? You respect what is true while also protecting what you need. You stop measuring your value by someone else's ability to choose you. You stop believing their fear means something is wrong with you. You stop carrying the responsibility of proving that you are patient enough, understanding enough, or loving enough to make someone finally open their heart. Because if someone became deeply attached to you because of these powerful reasons, then the truth may actually be much simpler. They were not drawn to you because you chased them. They were not affected because you tried to impress them. They were not connected to you because you acted perfect. They were touched because your presence brought something real to the surface. You gave them a feeling of emotional comfort. You reminded them of parts of themselves they had forgotten. You became someone whose presence carried a meaning they could not easily replace. And those things are not ordinary. Those experiences can change a person's entire emotional world. But whether they choose courage or continue hiding behind fear is a reflection of where they are internally, not a measurement of your worth. Remember this deeply. Their ability to receive love is their personal journey. Your value was never something they had to approve. If you have spent nights questioning whether the connection was real, if you have doubted yourself because their actions felt confusing, if you wondered whether you imagined the depth between you, listen carefully.